Hello Animorphs fans and welcome back to the Animorphs Reviews YouTube channel. We're doing another podcast watch today. I've got my beer ready. I've got my forfeits ready, which are as follows. If you don't already know what this is, it's a freaking drinking game. If you haven't caught up yet, then you're a bit slow. Drinking in fingers, modern political issues, 2 fingers, character traits, 1 finger, TV show criticism, 4 fingers, 90s references, 3 fingers, movie talk, 2 fingers, aforementioned 1 finger, something wrong, 2 fingers, naughty talk, 2 fingers, podcast name, 1 finger. And if there is a mention of cinnamon buns, then it activates the wild drink, okay? So, Animorphology. This one was recommended to me about 6 months ago by Toomey. And I didn't do it. Why? Because back then I was doing a different format where I'd watch the entire thing and see how much I could drink. I've changed now, so I'm limited to the amount I drink. It comes down to how long it takes me to finish those drinks. So I can listen to longer episodes. And what we have today is book 41, The Familiar. Yes, I did do this book when I was watching the last one, which was Animorphs Anonymous. The reason I'm doing it again is because I got a bit wound up in the last episode, and I feel a bit guilty. I probably went a bit over the top a couple of times. But I'm a bit like my dad. I've inherited his trait that if I'm passionate about something, I sometimes get lost in the moment and get a bit riled up. It's just one of my unfortunate traits. But I'm watching them talk about it because I want to see if they feel the same way that the Animorphs Anonymous team did, or whether they feel more like I do about this book. Spoiler alert, I freaking love this book. It's an awesome piece of written fiction. So let's see what Animorphology thinks about this particular book. Let's go.
My name is Jenny.
My name is Ted.
My name is Gray.
And this is Animorphology.
That's a podcast name.
The visitor,
1 finger,
the encounter,
drink.
the message, the predator, the capture, the stranger, the alien, the secret, the android, the forgotten, the reaction, the chain, the unknown, the escape, the underground, the decision, the exposed, departure, the sick discovery.
I like the intro.
Threat, the conspiracy, the separation, the deception, the suspicion, resistance, the extreme sacrifice, the diversion, and the beginning.
I'm not sure if this podcast is still going. I imagine not, because this one was done in March 23rd, 2020. If you like what you hear, by the way, I'll put a link to this website in the description and you can go check out their other stuff. So let's see what Ted... I'm sorry, I forgot you. I am terrible with names. I'll catch up. I know there's a Ted.
The familiar.
Time to talk about Ted's favorite book, book 41.
The Familiar.
Ted's favourite book.
This one.
Right, so is that sarcasm? Straight off the bat. This is Ted's favourite book. It's not many people's favourite book, so when they say that, I'm assuming it's sarcasm. Let's see how they do this.
Yeah, hashtag this one.
They don't
Ted
like
is
it.
looking forward to this
I know
for so
how I
long.
feel about it. I've heard a little bit about how Jenny feels about it.
Wait, how is that, Jenny? How do you feel about this?
I mean, it's my favorite book.
She's lying. I want to hear how you feel about it, Gray.
I have just one quick question for you guys. What the shit?
Oh, they're going to hate it as well, aren't
I am
they?
unfortunately-
Right, in that case, Animorphology, disclaimer. Nothing I say today will be personal against you, okay? As I mentioned earlier, when I get passionate about something, like a book I enjoy, I sometimes might go a bit over the top. Just to warn you. Let's have some fun. Let's see how many times I can... Forfeit, right? Same as last time. 2 fingers. Anytime I say it was just a dream or something along those lines. Okay, let's go.
Unable to answer that question, right?
Okay.
Yeah. I also am not informed on that subject.
I don't understand many of the things that happen.
If you didn't understand it, how did you feel about it?
I didn't.
I'm just looking at it. Do I look very red?
Yeah.
Why do I look so red?
You're in the sun today?
I'm not sunburned, am I? Well, if I am, that sucks. I just look very red as I'm looking.
Yeah, I think you got sunburned.
I'm like a traffic light. I'm just going to carry on.
Feel good. I mean, I don't viscerally hate it like I viscerally hated 37, for example.
Everyone hates
but
37.
I really didn't like it. It's definitely I think it's in the bad quadrant.
Nah.
I'm waiting to, do our discussion so that maybe I can be convinced otherwise. But
Ted can make some
I wish I
arguments.
was there
So-
with
I
you.
don't know.
This was the one that, like, when I was like, are there bad Animorphs books? I knew that this one was a bad Animorphs book.
No.
And I think I tried to read it with an open mind. I think there are probably interesting things to take out of it, but I really, really, like, viscerally don't like it.
So I actually kind of liked it.
Yeah.
What?
No, I mostly just wanted to see if Ted would get really mad when I said that. I was really set up. I knew about the twist at the ending, and I was set up to think that it was going to be like 37 level bad because Ted hated it so much.
Okay.
And so I think I was able to appreciate the interesting parts of it and like be surprised every time I was like, oh, I kind of like that. Okay. It was very good like expectations management for me. So I don't think that this is a good Animorphs book, but I was pleasantly surprised by it.
Okay, so the key here is lower your expectations.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Yeah.
So would you like to be reminded of
Yeah, Ted,
what
can you
happens
give
in this
us
book?
the 60-second summary?
Yeah, it might be tough to keep it to 60 seconds. So I'm going to...
Just do your best.
Yeah, I'm going to start now. So in this book, the Animorphs have a really tough battle. It's a lot like the beginning of Megamorphs 4, but Rachel and Marco almost get left behind. At the end of the battle, Cassie is broken and it feels like she's going to quit the Animorphs, and Jake can't even bring himself to comfort her. He's falling apart. He goes home and has an awkward confrontation with Tom, but he's just like so exhausted. He let Tom see him in his morphing outfit. He falls into bed with like Tom's shadow on the doorway. And then he has a really long bad dream, and when he wakes up, he calls Cassie and apologizes. The end.
Oh, it's a good summary.
An excellent summary.
Yeah.
Yes, that was
Love
great.
it.
How many seconds was that?
It was a little more than 30 seconds.
Very
All
impressive.
right.
Great job.
So this is the level of detail it takes for us to get...
Already, I like this group quite a lot. I think they've got really good banter. I just enjoy listening to them. So I'm going to disagree with them a lot, and I might say some sweary words, but let's just stop delaying, Adam. Let's go in.
Get to 60-second summary.
Exactly. Good to know.
So yeah, this is the one where it was all a dream, and I think the things that I'm gonna want to talk about are like giving it the benefit of the doubt as a psychological study of Jake. What does it say about what Jake is going through right now?
Yeah.
And I actually quite liked the chapters that I just discussed, where they have a really tough fight at the beginning, and the way that Jake wakes up and reaches out to Cassie. That's actually a nice arc.
Yeah.
The dream nonsense is like,
So,
it's terrible.
Ted, I know you already did a summary, but in case some of us have forgotten the dream, which was the vast majority of the book, do you want to tell us?
120 of the 144 pages of this book were the bad
Do you want to fill us in a little bit on what happens in
Yeah,
the
okay,
dream?
okay. So Jake wakes up, he wakes up in a dream, and he keeps thinking, is this a dream? Is this a dream? This couldn't even be real. But he's found himself 10 years older, so we learned that he's 25 in the dream, so he's 15 in normal Animorphs time.
Ish.
He
I don't think
wakes
it's
up
ever
in-
quite that clear cut.
It seemed pretty clear cut to me that was the math they were doing. But he wakes up and he's in this like Orwellian future in New York where the Yeerks have won completely. They've not only crushed humans, but they've crushed Andalites. Jake is a controller. He has his assigned work role in society, and he has to take the subway to the science center because he's a scientist or something. And everything's really bad, and he doesn't know whether he can morph or not. He doesn't know what's happened to the other Animorphs, and he gradually uncovers what is happening in this vision of the future. And he learns from a hardened terrorist, infested but still resistance fighting Cassie that there is kind of an ongoing resistance to the Yeerk Empire that's involved in like blowing up Manhattan buildings and doing stuff like that. And Cassie is like, yeah, let me refresh your memory. So Jake, you finally lost it. Tom figured out you were the leader of the Animorphs. He infested you, and then the rest of us all got chased down. Rachel got killed. It was really bad. And then this whole future happened. So, like, obviously it's all your fault, Jake. And Jake's like, oh, no, I screwed up. But, like, maybe I can somehow still go back and stop it. Or, like, what's happened to me? Cassie's doesn't seem particularly, like, thrown for a loop that Jake has just shown up out of nowhere. And he kind of has no memory of what he's been going through, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of, like...
I'm so tempted to say the four words or variation of? Right, yeah, I'm going to, because it matters, okay? So he made a point there to say Cassie is she's not really that fussed about Jake just appearing out of nowhere. The reason being, it's a fucking dream. So 2 fingers for me and everyone else, I guess. I mean, it's all well and good saying this is the plot of the dream, but the plot is entirely secondary to the psychological stuff that's going through Jake's head. Cassie not caring where he comes from, it really doesn't matter. What matters is simply what Jake sees about her, how she's changed. So her mindset regarding Jake isn't really that important.
Horrible stuff with Texans. If you like reading about how gross Texans are and how scary they are, this book has lots of that. He eventually uncovers, so Cassie says, hey, you're a scientist. We need you to help us use the laser on the Chrysler building.
Because what are the Yerks planning, Ted?
Yeah,
what are they
so
planning?
The Yerks have this laser, like a Death Star style laser, on the Chrysler building. That it's covered in a mylar sheath. Is that the word that they use over and over again?
Yep.
There's a mylar sheath that somehow is important to what this plan is. They're going to shoot a laser at the moon and turn it into a Kandrona-style sun.
Yeah.
Sure.
So
The Yerks
Cassie
want
just
the moon.
wants Jake to sabotage this mission so that instead they blow up the moon
Yes.
and rain moon parts down across all of Earth. Hopefully disrupting civilization enough that, when it grows back again, there will be, it'll be free and not otherwise.
I don't remember that, but I'm not going to go reading through the whole book just to find if that's wrong or not.
And Jake is like, yeah, I don't know. He finds out that Marco has become Visser 2 in this timeline. He finds out that, is Axe just dead?
Axe became a controller who helped with the takeover of the Andalite homeworld.
So he's just not around.
I think he's not around.
Tobias was the only Animorph who escaped. He's thought dead. His ghost / actual Tobias appears sometimes. And then it turns out that Tobias had acquired Axe and then got really old, so he looks like Elfangor and is part of the resistance movement. And Rachel actually isn't dead, but she's in a wheelchair. She's, been horribly disfigured by what she went through, and she's also part of the resistance. Jake meets a bunch of free people below the surface of the Earth who are in this, multi-species Chi-esque paradise. And then the end of the book basically boils down to he's at the Chrysler building, and he has this pivotal decision to make. Is he going to blow up the moon and perhaps save the world? Or is he going to keep Marco and the Yerks from killing Cassie? And so it boils down to this choice. And the first unforgivable thing that this book does is that Jake makes the choice and wakes up from the dream and never reveals to us what the choice is.
Now, I remember when there was 1 or 2 books after The Familiar. I forget which book it was, but it was pretty much made clear what Jake's decision was. I can't remember in what context. I just remember making that comment in one of my reviews. But because I can't tell you right now what that is, I'm not going to count it as something wrong. But the mere fact that they're complaining that it wasn't revealed to us, when the implications are there after the fact. Again, why do you want it handed on a platter? This book is about... it's trying to make you think and trying to make you see what patterns Jake is taking as he goes forward, and then the future books will add context to this. This also adds context to what comes before. It's a very contextual book.
Classic Jake. He's
The
not going to
choice
tell
was
us.
to burn down Joe Bob Finestra's house.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, and sure, whatever. But it's really getting into what Jake is going through, but it refuses to commit to one thing that Jake would do or another, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. This is actually really difficult. I'm so close to saying that it's something wrong, but I can't remember the exact quotes which prove that that's the case. So I'm 99% certain that in the dream he pressed the button, because we get clues later on. The mere fact that he calls Cassie to ask if she's okay, to me, is a big clue that he pressed the button. But again, I can't just say they're wrong, because I'm not 100% certain.
We're going to talk about it.
Yeah, the next thing is, as he is coming out of this dream, when he has made the choice, there is an Ellimist-like voice in his head that says, interesting choice. We shall have to study these humans further. Boopity boop boop. You know, I don't remember what it says, but I'm going to spoil this for you, Gray, because this is why it makes me so angry. This never comes back.
What the
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, this is.
I didn't know that, and Ted told me that, and I got way
just
better.
this isn't just like Garrotrons don't make an appearance again levels. This is like, if you're gonna have the It Was All a Dream book, and then have this thing at the end where it's like maybe it wasn't all a dream, and there's some higher power that's not the Ellimist Cryak, and you don't follow through with it, it's ridiculous.
Mm-hmm.
So that
Right, so I've got the chapter here, okay? Interesting choice in all caps. All was blackness when I heard the voice, a strange voice, old and young, male and female, echoing in my mind like distant thoughts speak. It was not the Elmist, no, it was a voice I'd never heard. They have strangely segmented minds, conscious, unconscious, and ability to reconcile both. They will bear more study, these humans. A bird's song, bright sun on my face. It is very strange, and I have been thinking, not now, but over the last few days, is it part of Jake talking to himself? That sounds counterintuitive. That's the wrong word. It doesn't sound right because it's saying they will bear more study, these humans, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that Jake has this meta moment where he's looking down at himself at all these decisions he's made in his own dream and what he's been doing, and just has this strange... These humans are a weird bunch in an enormous third-person style self-narration. A bit of a long shot. But it is a bit strange. I will give them that. It is a bit strange, but it's another mystery to this book which fascinates me. Obviously, it doesn't fascinate everybody.
That's why, to me, this is the It Was All a Dream book, because I
Okay.
can't even acknowledge how stupid that is.
But don't worry, Ted, because I've figured out who the voice is at the end.
Oh, no.
Okay, this is how the voice is described. A strange voice, old and young, male and female, echoing in my mind like distant thoughts speak. So it sounds like it's a blend of different voices, right? Like a bunch of different voices that have all been mashed up. This is Mogul.
No.
This is Mogul with his hologram technology, having just like, he's gotten even richer off of his subscription plan. And now he has decided to claim godlike power for himself.
I mean, thank goodness 37 is canon, and that makes total sense as an explanation.
It's a good effort, Julie. I still really hate this.
The thing that I got most annoyed by at this moment is that it wasn't... So at other times, Jake says, oh, maybe it's the Ellimist? Like, this feels like an Ellimist thing. I don't really know what's going on. And I'll just dream whatever.
And right, he has this really... I actually liked this part. He has this, in terms of It's All a Dreaminess, he has this horrible nightmare bit where he's, like, in his Yerk office, and suddenly all of the people in his office turn into, like, living corpses. It's, like, really scary, horror nightmare type thing.
Of the controllers he has killed.
Yeah.
So he sees the way that he personally killed each of these
Yeah.
Are you one of these people that makes noise in the background and deliberately makes it slower so it drags out more? Rather than just...
No.
She's putting ketchup on her bloody chips and she's doing it really slowly as to not making much noise, but it's just going... rather than just...
Sorry.
It's alright, my dear.
people in his office. Terrifying. But this, like, non-Ellimist voice shows up.
And she has to put every type of condiment and sauce on it possible.
Shit, you're right.
And now throws things on the floor. Make sure you don't step on those when you come back in.
Yeah.
Why did I get married?
Howard's like, oh good, another godlike figure for me to hate.
Not so much.
And it doesn't come back.
It doesn't come back.
I was just worried they're going to get stepped on again.
You're the one that didn't see them.
What do you mean?
Stepped on them?
No, it wasn't me, it was Kenny.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it wasn't me. I know, I punched him right in the face and made him cry. Not really.
I'm very annoyed by that.
Yeah. So my understanding is that there is some, like, fan-in that has tried to reconcile this with some things that happened later in the series or, like, other parts of it. But it definitely doesn't come back.
Because when we meet the Ellimist and Cryak, isn't there a thing about forces above them?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
think
but-
the Ellimist does say there are things more powerful
That's
than me
true.
or whatever.
Okay.
These guys are knowledgeable, and I freaking like that.
There's nothing in canon
Don't like the fact that they don't like this book, but they're still very knowledgeable.
that you can even connect without doing a lot of work.
I am very annoyed by that.
Yeah, that's unreasonable. It's such a cop out. Like they just did Megamorphs 4, which was such a well done, like, this isn't real. Let's like see how things could have gone and then go back to reality. And like there's a reason for it. It's like nicely connected with like Jake's choices. The subtemporally grounded thing is kind of a cheat, but like it's otherwise like a well done book. And this one is just like, oh, we don't know what to do. I don't know. Jake has a dream and it's scary and he has to make moral choices.
Why can't you just have it be Jake has a bad dream? Right?
Yeah.
That would be
That's a
sort
good
of
question.
annoying, but
Yeah.
Animorphs has done plenty of goofy, like, okay, now then they all demorph from Anteater and go about their business. You know, like, it doesn't need to have, like, that weighty
You're
of an
right,
ending.
because that's sort of in line with the weirdness of Cassie is subtemporally grounded. We can't just have it be the droid doesn't like the way this is going and so he's giving them another choice. It's, oh, there's a sci-fi thing that is explaining this. And this is another one like...
The whole Cassie is a temporarily grounded thing was just a bit weird. And if you've watched my Annie theory, I've talked about that, and it's a pretty big clue that she's part of the Ellimist, or at least just a segment of the Ellimist, sort of like how he sent himself down as an Andalite down to the Andalite homeworld and what have you. That sort of gives a good explanation as to why Cassie has all these weird powers that pop up now and again. Yeah, it is interesting, and it's worth discussion on what that voice was at the end with Jake. But again, it's one of those things where we're not handed the answer on a platter. And I do quite like that. It doesn't go against anything we know. It doesn't, like, ruin anything else that happens in Animorphs. That's when I don't like something. Usually when it's either a complete plot convenience to move a plot along, or it breaks the universe law. This doesn't do either of those. It adds a bit of mystery to what this whole dream was, because we're pretty sure it's not Craig or the Ellimist. Who could it possibly be? Is it Jake's own psyche observing him and his surroundings in a big meta sense, or what have you? It's a mystery.
This sci-fi thing is explaining it. What? We won't explain the sci-fi thing. Just tell you that
I
there
would
is
be
one.
curious to ask them whether they, like, thought that this was
Where did they think this is going somewhere?
I
Yeah.
wonder if it was like they felt like it was all a dream, was a cop-out, and they threw this in later on, or if they had an idea that was like, this was going to go somewhere, and they just decided not to
If
go
they
that
thought
direction.
it was going to go somewhere, I can forgive it a little more. Because
Right.
if it's like, I don't know, it's all a dream as a cop-out, so let's throw in some, like...
Thing is, it doesn't. I've talked about this before. It doesn't really fall into the "it was only a dream" trope, because that trope, so far as I know, is when something happens and then you jump out of it and it never happened, and you're suddenly just, oh shit, none of that happened. The thing that makes this different is you're pretty much told very early on during this dream that it's a dream, that it's not actually happening. It's made pretty obvious. So when we get him waking up, there's no surprise. There's no, oh shit, it was just a dream. What the hell? That doesn't happen, which is why I don't think it falls under that category. I don't think it falls into that trope.
Totally bogus sci-fi stuff we'll never return to, because that's not a cop-out.
Yeah.
Putting in a godlike figure, no, that there definitely isn't a term for that from, like, you know, ancient dramas.
I didn't like it.
Yeah.
Fair
Just
enough.
because people can't see my facial expressions on our...
They can imagine, though.
Yeah, I was wrinkling my nose a whole bunch. I
They've
don't
seen
like
you
it.
on the live stream now, and they know what you
I need
look
more
like.
forfeits. I want a drink.
I didn't like it.
Yeah.
It just made me very annoyed. I mean, I also, part of the reason I think I was annoyed was I find narratives where it is deliberately obscure, like things are happening and then something completely different is happening and there's no explanation, we never come back to this. And then in this one they explain it by, and it was all a dream. But before that point, it's like, I need you to give me either a little more or a little less exposition. One of those two things, because where you are here, it's just frustrating to me that I'm not, like, I felt very dumb for not being able to follow what was happening.
Yeah, because it doesn't actually make sense, because it's a dream.
Because it's a dream, yeah. And there were
Yeah.
threads.
At least these three get it. The Animorphs Anonymous bunch didn't get that. These three recognise that it's a dream, therefore it doesn't logically have to make sense. It feels good to be validated in that regard, that these three also say, yeah, it doesn't need to logically make sense because it's a dream. They seem to find it frustrating. I quite liked the format, personally.
It's that kind of like Tobias.
Why did like a ghost red-tailed hawk keep appearing? Tobias
Yes.
wasn't in red-tailed hawk form anymore.
No, he was an Andalite Noplit, possibly question mark, who looked like Elfangor, possibly question mark.
And now they've come back to not realising that it's a fucking dream. Hence why these things happen. Drink. What you've basically done there is said, we know that the plot doesn't need to make logical sense because it was only a dream. So why was Tobias a ghost? It's like, it's a dream. You've just said it. Why? Oh.
That bit where Tobias shows up also was very dreamlike in the way that he's like, oh, it's definitely Elfangor.
And then
he's
suddenly
like,
it
oh,
wasn't
it is
Elfangor anymore.
Tobias.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that feel, but again, they sort of lean into that dreamlikeness a little bit of it, but not
Yeah.
enough, to
Right.
your point, not enough to really, like, get in that headspace of, like, we're just going through Jake's subconscious, and isn't that a fun place to be for?
I think there are enough clues, personally. Maybe that's because I knew going into this book that it was a dream, but when I was reading it, I looked at it and thought, yeah, it's clearly putting that across, just the way it's written. But
Wow.
far be it
Yeah,
for me to
so I didn't
not
remember
put my
this
biases
book,
in
but
there.
I did remember that it was the It's All a Dream book, mostly because I sort of knew that had happened, and I remembered its existence enough that when Ted was like, yeah, there's an It's All a Dream book, I was like, oh, it's 41, right, okay. So I read the whole thing knowing it was a dream, and that was better, I think, because otherwise I would have been frustrated trying to figure it out. Of course, that's not the way it's intended to be read, because you pick it up, you don't know it's going to be a dream. But it was sort of fun, especially like going through after having read the whole thing and like looking for like notes and things to talk about. Like, I sort of enjoyed like, oh, this is sort of a nod to the dream likeness. This sort of makes a lot more sense when you think, oh, Jake's subconscious is generating this. But like, it was not actually dreamlike.
Yeah.
Like, this was not the Restless episode of Buffy where they're actually having these dreams and it's impressively like what a dream is like. This is way too narratively coherent.
No. He jumps into things and ends up in other places. And all this weird stuff starts happening, like Elfangor turning into Tobias, whatever. So let's have a think about this. I'm just trying to remember what exactly happened through this book. There's actually no rewind button on this. Oh, maybe. Let's have a listen to what they say again.
They sort of lean into that dreamlikeness a little bit of it, but not
Yeah.
enough, to
Right.
your point, not enough to really, like, get in that headspace of, like, we're just going through Jake's subconscious, and isn't that a fun place to be for a while?
Yeah.
So I didn't remember this book, but I did remember that it was the It's All a Dream book, mostly because I sort of knew that had happened, and I remembered its existence enough that when Ted was like, yeah, there's an It's All a Dream book, I was like, oh, it's 41, right, okay. So I read the whole thing knowing it was a dream, and that was better, I think, because otherwise I would have been frustrated trying to figure it out. Of course, that's not the way it's intended to be read, because you pick it up, you don't know it's going to be a dream. But it was sort of fun, especially like going through after having read the whole thing and like looking for like notes and things to talk about. Like, I sort of enjoyed like, oh, this is sort of a nod to the dream likeness. This sort of makes a lot more sense when you think, oh, Jake's subconscious is generating this. But like, it was not actually dreamlike.
Yeah.
Like, this was not the Restless episode of Buffy where they're actually having these dreams and it's impressively like what a dream is like. This is way too narratively coherent.
Yeah, and he's making decisions and has like a timeline of what's happening in his brain that
Okay, so I'm listening to them, and I get what they're saying. So they think it wasn't dreamlike enough to be convincing straight off, which is fair, absolutely fair. One thing I do want to point out, I'm looking through these comments. They got comments on this video, and where does it say? Applegate said that those were just a couple of ideas they hoped to come back to in a later book, but just didn't end up working out that way. I don't think there was a defined plan for them, though. Okay, so if that's the case, that probably answers that, which is a bit disappointing for me. So if that's true, then Applegate said that there was going to be something happening with that voice at the end, but they never got round to it. That's a shame. That is a shame. Carry on.
Has some internal sense as dreams don't normally. I mean, down to like he wakes up at this time and has to do these
Can
things.
read
in the morning.
numbers on a clock.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you were gonna do Jake is having nightmares book, it would have been so good to have it like take place over a couple of nights, like he's losing,
Yeah.
really deal with just like this toll it's taking on him. Because the bookend bits are so good, like where he's really falling apart.
Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
so it's just like you don't need as much attention as the dream bits get in order to like deliver on that. Right,
Yeah.
it's like
But they weren't trying to be like, Jake is having a nightmare, because you don't know. Like, they were never trying to communicate that to us in the narrative. It's just like, he's inexplicably 10 years in the future. So they just wanted to write a book that was Jake's dream.
Right.
well, no, but is
For
it
some reason. I guess it's like they wanted to explore the thought experiment of like, what if the Yeerks win?
yeah? What if
What
the
would the world
Animorphs
be
failed
like?
today? What would happen?
yeah, but the
No, I don't think that's it. I really don't. I think that's wrong. I'm not going to call it something wrong because it's their opinion. It's not like a factual thing. If that's what you think coming out of this book, you think it's just painting a picture of what things would be like if the Yeerks win, I think you've come at it from the wrong direction. It's all about Jake's psyche. That's what it's all about. The Yeerk thing, the Yeerk plot, whatever, secondary. It's all about Jake's head. This is his transitionary book from child to military leader. And this is the book just summing up in one dream the thought process that he's going through, from my perspective.
thing is that we've seen that plot before at least once that I can think of, right? Isn't
Like
that
in Seven? Yeah.
Right? And so
And we just saw a different kind of counterfactual in Animorphs
Yeah.
4, which was so much.
And this is where they come into a new crit. So they've said, this is what this book is about, what it's like in the future of the Yeerks. We've done this before. That's a criticism of this book. But the premise is incorrect there. The premise that it's about the Yeerk future, what it's going to be like. No. So then going to compare it to other times we've seen that scenario, to me, it doesn't count.
Better done.
right. So I wonder if part of my frustration is seeing this as retrodden ground done less well.
Yeah, definitely.
No, I'm going to count that as something wrong just because I fucking feel like it.
That is so what it is.
Yeah, and it's like, it also, projecting into the future this way doesn't work with the same kind of small universe logic that you can get away with in the series, right? Like, because it's like, it only makes sense in a dream that he's going to run into Cassie and Marco
his
and Rachel and
dad.
Tobias. Oh yeah, and his dad!
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why his dad and not Tom doesn't actually make any sense. Like,
Yeah, why isn't Tom in his dream?
Yeah,
that's
it's
that's
all
actually like a weird
very
very
missing thing.
weird. Yeah.
And there's all this weird stuff where he's like, I saw him. He looked familiar. My memory. And then it's like in the next page, he's like, he was my father. He looked exactly the same as when I'd last seen him. And I was like, did you not recognize him?
Yeah.
Is this just because it's a dream and that's why you can morph sometimes and sometimes you can't because it's a dream? But
Yes, they answered it. They did my drink, podcasters, 2 fingers, because you said it yourselves that time. And because we all drink when the other person drinks, because they have to drink 2 fingers, we all do. Drink, everyone, and be merry.
like, I don't know, you can't get away with that and also tell the story as if it's not a dream. It
Right.
just-
And I mean, and what I found annoying about that was that sometimes they called it out and like, lampshaded it of like, who would have guessed in a city this large that you would run into all these people? And sometimes it was like, no, it's very reasonable that this would be, Rachel would be your contact because she's
Of course,
wants
it's easy
see
to
you
sneak
again.
a person in a wheelchair with only one limb into this, like, Yeerk location.
Right.
To a-
It was
The kitchen of your cafeteria.
They might actually say it again, because they're doing my job for me. Every time they say this, they say it themselves. But if they don't, I have to drink 2 fingers. How can you sneak Rachel in past all this Yeerk security in this place?
Yep.
in the middle. Yeah, it just didn't make any sense.
It's really annoying because it didn't make sense and you can't even, like, fully get mad at it for not making sense because it was a dream.
Yeah, they did it. They're doing what the last podcast didn't. They're saying, oh, this bit doesn't make sense, this bit doesn't make sense. But I guess it was just a dream. Are you alright over there?
Yeah.
Right, I'm going to fill my drink and then it's another two
It has
fingers.
that like get out of jail
Because
free
they just
card,
said it
but
again.
It doesn't. Yeah.
I can still get mad at it.
Yeah. No. Yes.
Yeah.
You can. Yeah.
I'm very capable of doing that.
But it's like really trying to have it both ways. It's like telling a coherent narrative, even though it's a dream. But like, oh, if it doesn't make sense in places, that's fine because it's a dream.
No, that's... What did I say in the last episode? You know, just because dreams don't necessarily make sense doesn't mean that things within that dream don't adhere to the laws of physics or what have you, or any sort of sense. So, yeah, you can have it both ways. Things in dreams can make sense, and they also can't make sense. It's not mutually exclusive in a dream, okay? But I will say these lot are doing a lot better than the last lot, because the last lot didn't even recognise the "it was just a dream" thing. That never crossed their minds. At least with these three, they understand that, but they're now stuck at the part where they can't get it. They can't understand that things in dreams can and cannot make sense at the same time. You know, if I dream that I jumped from my chair right now, and instead of hitting the ceiling, I just appeared on my roof. The roof still obeys the laws of gravity. That makes sense, doesn't it? And the air will still be breathable. That makes sense. But the part of me jumping through didn't make sense. Doesn't mean the dream as a concept doesn't make sense. So... yeah, the complaint of, oh, some of it makes sense, but some of it does make sense. Oh, that's just, I don't like that. Like the last lot, you seem to either want it to make all total sense or no sense at all, which wouldn't even be a book, it would just be gibberish. So, you can't have it both ways, unfortunately. Anyway, two fingers, drink.
I guess, the thing that's frustrating is I think a lot of the world building is like, these are the real consequences of your potential failure, Jake. But
Right,
that's
it's not just
so
his
undermined
fears,
by
yeah.
it being stuff that ends
Yeah.
up being a dream, or like is like calculated to get him to make this choice, or like whatever even if you wanted to allow the like interesting choice human bit at the end. It's like, it's not quite the same as the Elemist being like, yeah, I really need you to step up because if you had been a little more reckless with Tom, here's the future. Like, you know, like that's kind of what this plot is supposed to be doing, but and it's not that it's just not that plausible. Like the stuff that falls out. Like maybe the idea they all get infested, but Rachel gets herself killed and Tobias escapes. Maybe that's plausible, but where it goes from there, it doesn't really.
I feel like the
track.
effects on the Animorphs don't really make sense. Like where the Animorphs are now make
Yeah.
no sense. Like there are some of the most dreamlike parts of it. But I don't know. Do you think that the like effects on civilization are implausible?
I know, definitely more what happens to Cassie and
yeah.
Marco.
Like particularly like Tobias and Rachel like don't make any sense. Why would Rachel be so physically affected if she can morph?
And he asks that and then is like, oh,
Right. Catch yourselves out again.
I better not say that out loud. It's like, well...
No, this is a really good question. Unfortunately, you won't get a good answer because it's a dream and things don't make sense. But
They said it again! They're doing my job for me, but we still have to drink. Even though I'm not saying it, they said it. So we all drink. Two fingers, drink.
yeah, and like Tobias.
I like that this... Right, so... Firstly, let's drink these two fingers. So when I was doing the Animorphs Anonymous one, they didn't recognise the whole dream thing. They just went through and assumed everything had to make sense. So I kept saying, it's a fucking dream. And I made it a forfeit because I was saying it so bloody often. This lot are saying basically the same things. Oh, this bit doesn't make sense. But then before I can say it, they jump in and say, oh, but it was just a dream, I suppose. They're just doing my job for me. At least they've taken a step further than Animorphs Anonymous and actually recognised what's going on. But they're still not quite going all the way. This is fun. I'm enjoying this. I should watch every podcaster's Book 41 and just compare them all. It's actually quite fun. If you want me to do that, feel free. But if you want me to move on from Book 41, I can do that as well. I do want to see somebody react. I do want to see a podcast reaction to book 37 at some point, because that'll be fun.
Is like in Andalite form. He like nothlited himself for some reason, even though morphing is like going to be his best asset in like this fight, and is like hiding in the library. Is like.
And then did he? Because then there's a red-tailed hawk, and it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So this is probably something that I should cut, because I have no idea if our listeners will get...
Right, so they didn't do it that time. It's a fucking dream. Why was Tobias in the library, and why did he become a Nothlit when his morphing was only... Because it's a fucking dream. That's why. And they didn't catch themselves out this time, unless they jump in now.
this at all, but like
Drink.
in hearing you talk about like the dreamlike logic, it actually reminds me of nothing more than the Metal Gear Solid video game series by Hideo Kojima, where it's like basically the game exists as like a series of like dramatic plot twists that don't make any sense, and then are later justified by adding an incredible amount of lore with like, oh, well, there were nanomachines, or like he's actually part vampire, you know, like just trying to like throw everything at the wall to see what sticks. It's like you get presented with these dramatic scenes between him and Marco or him and Cassie, and then it's like you have to do so much work to explain why. It's like, so I think it's like with the morphing thing, it's like, oh, well, maybe the Yeerks also invented this like morph disruption technology, and that's
we never
part
get
of
an
why
answer
they
for
failed.
that, even.
Well, of course, right? And it's like,
Because it's a dream.
right, well, maybe Tobias is stuck in a Saria rip where his ghost hawk, you know, like he split into two personalities, and one stayed as a hawk and one became an Andalite. You know, like it's terrible.
Yeah, I also think that some of the character moments, as you were saying, like they
I think they're moving on. But you all right? Yeah. Oh. Yeah, I think you're overthinking it. If you're trying to understand why certain aspects of this make sense, why certain characters are in certain places and all that sort of stuff. But like you just said there, and like I was going to say, it's a fucking dream. So you don't need to explain that. I think the thing that this lot don't... I mean, I'm not going to claim to be right. I'm just talking completely from my perspective, so disclaimer, this is all my opinion. This book is about Jake's thought processes, his psyche. Everything else, because it's in a dream, it doesn't have to make sense. Everything we're looking at, we've got to analyse as if we're looking through Jake's eyes, what he's seeing and why he's seeing it. Why is he seeing Rachel in a wheelchair? Why is he seeing Tobias flying around and is then in the library? Why are we seeing these things? No, don't worry about it making logical sense why they're there, because it's in a dream, so just wipe that. That's not a concern. What is a concern is why is Jake seeing that specifically? And that's what these three don't seem to... They haven't grasped that. They're looking at stuff that they don't need to look at and getting frustrated because they're not finding answers they're looking for. What they need to look at is just purely Jake's psyche. But I will give them credit, because Animorphs Anonymous, they did a 2-hour podcast in this book and basically just covered the plot, and in a very shallow way, they didn't really explore anything. These three are at least trying to understand it, trying to delve into it, trying to pick bits out of it. I just don't think they're searching in the right area. This book really is a Marmite book, because I have seen people say that they really like it, and I think you have to be in the right mindset to read it. You have to know what you're looking for. Because when I read it, I hadn't read this book for years, back when I did my review for book 41, okay? I hadn't read it for, I must have been about 12, 13 when I read this for the first time, and I didn't read it again till I was 29. So pretty much fresh eyes. I knew it was a dream. That's all I knew. I knew of its bad reputation. And I went into it and I was blown away on first read. Blown away. Because I instantly, well, not instantly, but after only a short time reading the dream section, I knew there's no point in looking into the plot whether things make sense. I'm looking through Jake's eyes and trying to understand why he's seeing what he's seeing. Not where it came from or why that thing came there in a logical sense. Why is he seeing that? That's what I started, and that's why I really love this book, because I took it from that angle, and it's brilliant if you take it from that angle. I think people are coming at it from the wrong way. I think it's a really a misunderstood book. Let's see how they carry on.
Don't make any sense, Rachel and Tobias in particular. But I think the Cassie arc also, in the dream, does not serve to provide the Jake arc needed for the bookends.
Yeah.
Because the Cassie in this kind of dream future is this like badass warrior who is on the side of the whatever the hell they're called, the European.
EF.
And she's
Education first, yeah.
jaded. She's like, I see how war works. I was naive. And Jake is like, no, Cassie.
No, you're
And
still
actually, Jake's
sweet.
like, this is my fault because of that one time I didn't comfort her.
Right.
I set her
Right.
and Tobias on this path towards ruthlessness, which, like, I can understand feeling guilty about his role and what they've become, but also that's, like, super self-centered. Like, this one choice on your part is why they chose to become...
Right. I could be wrong, and please correct me if I am. But sometimes it's a straw that breaks the camel's back sort of scenario, okay? It wasn't that one straw that did it, but that was the last one you placed that made it the pile too heavy for the camel that broke its back, okay? He's not looking at that single example. He's looking at that as one piece of a big pile that he's created. He's not looking at thinking, oh, that one time where we found that Yerk pool entrance, I didn't say anything to her, and that's what caused this. No, it's more than that. He's using that as the what's the word I'm looking for? I'm going to use words that probably don't make total sense in the situation, but it's like the focal point, the focal example. Okay, he's focused on that one example which represents all other examples that he's done, okay? It's not just this one example, it's all of them, but this is the face of the pile of examples.
these terrorists. Yes, it's all about you, Jake.
Well, and he
And yes, I'm going to count that as a something wrong.
He
Drink.
actually says that
Two
to
fingers.
Dream Cassie at one point. And he's like, oh, it's all my fault for that one really bad battle we had at the wherever it was. And she's like,
I don't even
I
remember
had
that.
completely forgotten
What?
that. Like, it's so...
Again, he's not just feeling guilty for that one time. It's not like if that didn't happen, he'd feel no guilt at all. No, it's the focal point. Okay, that's the straw that broke the camel's back, and that's why he remembers this specific point. And it just happened.
So much other stuff has happened. And by seeing her in this kind of battle-hardened warrior
Two
who
fingers, drink.
does not have any of the sweetness and light that is Cassie as he knows her, in theory that provokes him at the end to check in on her and see how she's doing after this terrible battle. But what actually happens in the dream is Cassie, who has been actually fighting this war, as far as we know in this universe, is aware of the consequences of her action and is making deliberate choices for the betterment, for what she believes to be the
world,
betterment of
yeah.
the world. Right? We can argue about what happens when you blow up the moon, and we will. But from her perspective, she has made this decision. And Dream
I'm so
Jake...
glad we will.
I think that it's a little too long for an episode title, but I really want it to be.
And Dream Jake is like, you're...
I got to admit, I do really like these three. These three are very good at what they're doing. I will say that. So bravo to Jenny, Ted, and Gray. I believe those are your names. So I apologise profusely if I've got that wrong.
Decisions don't matter to me.
Yeah, it's like all about Cassie for him, but he sort of is valuing her and like her existence and his ability to be with her, because he's like, maybe we'll get one more moment together, like over her actual like decisions. He's valuing her instead of respecting her,
Right.
like treating her as like an independent person.
And that drives me crazy
Well,
in narrative.
yeah.
I think it does come across as like a weakness or like it's not well thought through, but I do think that is a valid reading of Jake's character.
Yeah, I
Because he, like, we've talked a lot, especially more on this read, we've talked a lot about this undercurrent in their relationship where, like, he, was it in 31 where he kept being like, I'm not going to talk to Cassie about...
I'll talk to her
I'll
later.
talk to her
after
later. I'll
it's
talk to her
done.
later. She can, like, absolve me of things. Like, and he
Yeah.
kind of wants her to be... He wants her to be this safe and unaffected place that
Yeah.
he can return to while he makes the hard decisions. And so there is something in that here, but I don't think the book wants him to come across as badly as he does, right? Like, so it feels like it's a miss, but I do feel like it's Jake-ish, that he, at some degree, is fighting for the happy ending with an untouched Cassie, as he is fighting for the greater good.
That goes on to a very interesting point. That well done, Ted, because that is an interesting point that I haven't really thought about. How Jake treats each of the characters differently. Now, how would he treat Cassie? When you look at how he sees Cassie in this dream, sees that she's lost any semblance of innocence that she had, any love of the world around her, like nature and all that sort of stuff. How he reacts to her in all the other books. Does he try to protect her? Why does he try to protect her? Is it because he values that part of her that is now missing in this future dream Cassie being? So that makes sense to me. That works. And every time I hear somebody talk about this book, it adds a new little piece, which I love. It's just such a multi-layered book. And it saddens me that a lot of these other podcasters, I say other, but I'm not technically a podcaster, they don't like it. And I'm sad. And Jenny, Ted and Gray, I would love to just talk to you about this book. Just, if you ever see this video and you're up to this part, I want to try to change your mind. Let's read it together. Because I think I can convince you. I do. Okay? Great episode, by the way. I'm loving this.
Right,
Yeah.
like, that seems in sort of like a thing that is real to his character.
Yeah.
Do we want to talk about his decision that he has to make at the end? Not the
Yes.
decision he does make, because we can't talk about that, because he doesn't make it.
Oh, he
He
makes
does.
it.
Oh,
but
we don't get to see it.
what
Yes,
it
you're
is.
right. Yeah. So it's like,
I need to try to remember where. I think it was in book 40. I'm genuinely going to find this out now. Okay? So I believe it was in 43. I believe it's in 43. Just give me, just bear with me a moment. I believe it's when they were having a meeting. High school kid behind the cat stove. I believe it was in here somewhere. Where it was made pretty obvious the choice that he made, but I can't remember the context. I just remember making that comment when I reviewed one of these books, and I believe it was this one. Yeah, you're just going to have to bear with me. Sorry for the dead air while I look for this. I think it was about the part where Cassie decides she's not going to be part of it all. It's not there, it's too early. Where's the part where Cassie sods off? I think I'm too far back in the book. No one said anything in silent agreement except for Cassie. I'd have to go back. I'm sorry for the dead space, but I was trying to find it. I don't think I can at the moment, but I'll have to go back to it. All right, let's a couple more minutes, then I'll need a lavatory break.
It's such the classic, like, Spider-Man situation. It's like, do you save the woman you love or the bus full of children? Except in this case, the bus full of children is the entire world.
Kind of.
Kind of, but you're not exactly saving them. You're, like, giving them hope for the future. The book is not really questioning that blowing up the moon. I mean, it does question it, but in terms of, like...
Are you sure you don't want to talk about blowing up the moon first?
I kind of do. But no, the decision at the end, like, it seems to be coming from a place of, like, saving Cassie, you save Cassie, but blowing up the moon would be better for humanity. Like, that, it seems to have kind of settled at that point. My personal theory for why they don't show us the decision is that it's really morally indefensible to save Cassie, but, like, showing him doing the other thing is just so unpalatable from, like, a narrative perspective, because we're so...
I'm not sure if this is the moment, but in chapter 11 of book 43, The Test, so Cassie is kicking off because of all that's going on with the whole Taylor thing, who wants to essentially blow up the Yerk pool. So Jake is talking to Cassie. The peace movement Yerks are a small minority, Jake countered coldly. We can't really consider them, except maybe to warn them. Not consider them? Cassie repeated disbelievingly. What if your brother's at the pool when the gas explodes? Jake looked at his hands. I guess it's a sacrifice I have to deal with in order to protect thousands more, Jake said, his voice now expressionless. I think the thing about book 41, as I said earlier, it's a transition in Jake's psyche to the cold military leader. And book 43 here, in this point, is where we start to see Jake make that move into cold, calculating leader, okay? Because before that, it was all about Tom and all that. You know, he would do things to protect those close to him. But saying things like that, basically saying, well, fuck Tom, because I could save thousands more. We never saw that before book 41, and this is 43, so it's basically straight after. 42 is, as far as I'm concerned, non-canon. Okay, so it's basically the book after. That is a big clue to me that Jake hit the button. Because we never saw that until then in book 43, which might as well be book 42. Book 41, Jake has the choice between the button which saves everyone or save Cassie. And now suddenly he's become Mr. Abort Button. I think it's made pretty clear to us which way he went. And also at the end of book 41 when he calls Cassie to apologise, to me it's almost a guilt thing. That he knows the decision he made and he feels instantly guilty. And he wants to hold on to whatever innocence Cassie has for as long as possible before he might turn around and have her killed. Well, not have her killed, but you know what I mean. Anyway, I'm going to take a quick break there to go for a lavatory break. I'll be right back. Right, we're back. Let's see what other stuff we get up to.
Trained on narratives where, like, the people whose faces you recognize matter more because, you know, you care about them because they're the characters. And characters making decisions for the greater good, which Jake and the Animorphs make all the time. Like, it would be so much better for them personally in the short term to not fight this war. They're constantly putting themselves in danger.
He does, in, like, the first or second chapter, decide to leave Rachel and Marco behind,
Yeah.
right? So...
And it's not like he's never made a decision like that before. He's always putting them at risk. And it wouldn't make any sense for him to choose Cassie, but also I feel like they didn't feel like they could show him saving the world instead without having it seem unlikable. I don't know.
I think, so at the start of the book, he had this big decision to make of whether to leave or try to save Rachel and Marco. Now, he knew that there was a chance that Rachel and Marco could get out, and they did, and he hesitated about it. At the end of this dream, it's pretty certain, if you hit the abort button, Cassie is dead. That's it. You are killing Cassie. It's the next step, okay? So, and as far as I'm concerned, he hits the abort button. So it is that it's that step forward for Jake into just being this cold, calculated military leader.
They just didn't want to attempt that.
Yeah. What was your reaction to it, Gray?
I think that's right that it would be difficult to show that choice because you're either doing something that's very un-Jake or something that's very un-the Animorphs as a whole, right? Like,
yeah, that's a good point.
you know,
I like
they're
that.
putting themselves out there to save humanity, therefore he should choose to destroy the moon instead of saving Cassie, or but they're also in the fight for one another, and specifically Jake is there to protect Cassie most of the time, so
Saying it's un-Animorphs to put a character in such a horrible situation and forcing them to make a decision, I disagree with you completely. That's totally Animorphs, especially later in the series. This is basically the beginning of the end of the series. This is where it ups the stakes. I don't know what you're going on about there.
he can't disregard her in favor of the larger mission. So, I mean, I think it makes sense to me from an authorial perspective to be like, I don't know, he made a choice. I'm not gonna tell you what it is. Like, he made a choice. But I found it very frustrating.
The thing I like about the ending is it doesn't give it to you. You have to it's up to you to decide which he chose. And to me, it's pretty obvious that he chose to hit the abort button for a number of reasons. The most obvious is just seeing what happens to him later in the series. Look at book 53, where he sends Rachel off to die so that he can complete a certain part of the mission. It's pretty obvious. So the book just doesn't want to hand it to you on a platter. Here's this whole book about Jake's psyche. Now here's the answer. No, it's going to say, here's Jake's psyche. Here's a question. Where do you think it's going to go? There might be clues later down the line. I prefer that second option.
I want to give a reading of it that I think is like, I mean, this is another Jake thing where he doesn't come out and
By the way, at some point in this, we've covered Jake's leadership traits, so one finger, drink.
tell us things in his own narration.
Sure.
Like we've talked about this before, especially in book 16 with burning down the house. But so here's the moment before he makes the decision. So Cassie gets thrown off the building. Then a hand reached up. 3 fingers gripped the ledge. Cassie's hand. She wasn't gone, but in seconds she would tumble to her 60-story death, a splattered heap for Texans to lick up. In seconds, the moon ray would fire, shooting from the Chrysler building cannon
moon ray.
with perfect aim and precision. Cassie's hand, the large red button standing out on Marco's control panel, shielded behind glass. The word abort etched on the cover.
Amazing.
Cassie, the world. I knew what I had to do. No time for indecision. I saw my goal. Save what should be valued above all else. I leaped. And then, interesting choice, right? So,
This is incidentally one of the things that I sort of appreciated more on the reread. It's like, wow, this is the most cliche science fiction scenario. Like, your girlfriend is hanging from a platform by one hand, and there's like the supervillain with like the button that says abort to stop the mission. And I was like, oh, this is coming from Jake's subconscious. Okay, that's why that's why he has to blow up the moon. Okay, it totally makes sense. This is completely dumb and cliche. Great.
but so
Yeah, that's a very good point. And you came close to saying the magic words to make me drink, but you didn't, so. But yeah, of course it's going to be a big red button that says abort on it, because it's the dream, and that's a representation of the abort button. It's not going to be some obscure button on a desk somewhere. It's going to be in your face. That's the button.
So here we have, I knew what I had to do, save what should be valued above all else, right? So that's what we get of his decision there. And then in the end, he picks up the phone and calls Cassie, and she answers, hello.
I'm interested to see if they actually delve into this, why he calls Cassie. I'm interested.
And he says, time stopped. Everything got extremely quiet except for the pounding of my heart. I knew now. I'd made a choice. I knew what I was made of, my limitations and priorities. It's Jake, I said. No response. It's Jake, I said again, voice quaking like I never talked to her before. As if this were the first call I'd ever made, the only call that mattered. Cassie, I just wanted to ask what I should have asked you yesterday. Are you okay? That's the end of the book. So, him saying, I'm choosing what needs to be valued above all else, and then his response being like, I need to call Cassie afterward. To me, it doesn't make any sense as like a story that you're telling unless he chose to let Cassie die. And this is him picking up the phone and being like, well, this is kind of the choice that I arrived at subconsciously, and I need to try and reconnect and like salvage things.
Yes, Ted, you've hit the fucking nail on the head. Well done, mice. That's basically what I think, basically. The reason he called Cassie is because he's got this almost guilt of what he knows he would allow to happen. So he's got this guilt. He wants to not so much make things up to her, but you know what I mean, and Ted knows what I mean, and he's saying that. I want to see what else he says about this, because I thought it was a brilliant end to the book. See what he says.
But he's like a little bit scared at what his dream made him do. I don't see it as like, I was willing to throw the world away because love conquers everything.
See,
and
I sort of read it as that, but I hate it. So,
interesting.
I think there's space to read it both ways.
Well, tell me more about
Just
the
like,
way you read it.
choosing what had to be valued above all else read to me like, you have to save Cassie. Like he says at one point when he's thinking about the decision, like, what's the point of saving the world if, like, this one girl gets left behind? And, like, he definitely had some thoughts that were against that, but I feel like what had to be valued above all else, like, that language communicates to me that he chose Cassie over everything else.
So, like, the limitation there is he's
that
like,
he won't sacrifice Cassie, is what he's
is
saying.
it so he has to...
I mean, I don't think we're going to arrive at a decision, because...
No, I know.
Well, and I think the only call that mattered made me read it more that he saved Cassie, because calling her is the only thing that mattered. Saving her is the only thing.
Yeah,
So, like, that,
yeah.
on the one hand, that made me think that he saved Cassie, but also maybe recognizing that, like, if he didn't save her, then it was all the more important for him to call her afterwards and, like, check in.
Yep.
But again, I just don't think that the dream narrative supported the arc that Jake supposedly has over the course of this book.
So we've got conflict. They've all got their opinions. So Ted says it's a pretty solid indication that he chose the abort button, which that's the side I'm on. Now, forgive me, I can't remember which one's Jenny and which one's Grey, but the other one said, I thought it was an indication that he saved Cassie, and didn't really explain why he thought that would make him call her. And then the other one, I do apologise for not remembering who you are, says you could see it both ways. And then I forgot what else you said. Hold on a tick.
That he chose Cassie over everything else.
So, like, the limitation there is
Is
he's
that
like...
he won't sacrifice Cassie, is what he's
Is
saying.
it so he has to...
I mean, I don't think we're going to arrive at a decision, because...
No, I know.
Well, and I think the only call that mattered made me read it more that he saved Cassie, because calling her is the only thing that mattered. Saving her is the only thing.
Yeah,
So, like, that,
yeah.
on the one hand, that made me think that he saved Cassie, but also maybe recognizing that, like, if he didn't save her, then it was all the more important for him to call her afterwards and, like, check in. But again, I just don't think that the dream narrative supported the arc that Jake supposedly had.
So you have the third person that says it could be this, it could be that, but I just don't like it. Okay, so those are the three views that we have. Now, I clearly side with Ted on this issue. And I think it makes a lot more sense. And he's actually given an explanation for why he thinks it makes sense. He's full of guilt now because he knows the decision that he made in his dream. So he caused Cassie to almost sort of make up for it. Whereas the other person says, I think it's an indication that he chose Cassie, but gives no real explanation. It's just it's a guess. So I think Ted's got more evidence on his side. I think that's got the more evidence on it. And I think that's backed up with what happens in later books. The third person, again, I'm sorry that I can't remember if you're Jenny or Grey, doesn't like how it happened, but I disagree with that entirely. I think it rounds the book off so perfectly that I just absolutely love it for reasons that if you go back to my review of book 41, you'll see. I don't want to go too far into it.
As over the course of this book.
I guess, yeah, I do like, I mean, right, taking a big step back, I guess I like what parts of himself is Jake willing to sacrifice for the Animorphs mission, right? Which has been a thing that he struggled with. It's just like, this is a really silly version of it.
Yeah.
Wait, great. I want to know, so what arc do you think Jake is supposed to be having here? Like, learning to not be so ruthless? Like, what? Like, not throw away his friends or his friends' feelings for the fight?
No, quite the opposite.
I think it's more of, like, very specifically about his role in supporting Cassie in this particular moment.
Okay.
You know, one could take a step back and say he's also learning about the possible consequences for his relationships with everyone else and not to be guilty about having possibly left behind Rachel and Mark.
See, this is what I like about these three I'm not saying I dislike Animorphs Anonymous, but they never had these discussions. They just covered the plot in a very shallow way, never actually discussed what happened. These three are delving right into it, and I love that.
Go on behalf of everybody else. Like, we're getting insight into how he feels about being a leader, as we often do in Jake books, but I think his arc is specifically...
Character trait, one finger, drink.
I did not know how to reach out to Cassie in the moment, even though she needed me to even though I don't exactly know how to do it, I'm going to reach out to you. And that, in theory, because most of his dream is about his relationship with Cassie and figuring out what the hell is happening, that felt to me like what he was supposed to be learning or growing into. And then his relationship with everyone else in the group was kind of secondary to that.
Yeah.
Because we don't get a resolution of him, like, calling Marco and Rachel and saying, hey,
So
you guys,
sorry, I
like,
left you.
See, I still reckon that Jake and Cassie are the main characters. Well, Jake is the main character, and Cassie's sort of the second main character, and the rest are added in there to spice things up a bit. I still think that Jake is the main character. Cassie is... I'm just repeating myself at this point.
This really sucked, but this was the decision that we have to make in the heat of battle, whatever. Like, that's not the resolution we get. We get, hey, Cassie, how you doing?
Well, yeah, and it's also like the decision that he makes at the beginning where he's willing to, let two of the Animorphs die to save the rest of them is way more realistic and affecting than the absurd, over-the-top sci-fi scenario. Right, do I blow up the moon or save my, former girlfriend?
Yeah, and I think you're right, Gray, that, like, we get a very clear beginning and end of an arc. Jake doesn't support Cassie. Jake calls Cassie up to support her. But we don't get the connecting pieces. Right. And I think maybe the fact that they realized there was no way to substantiate that arc is why they didn't show us the decision.
I disagree. Basically.
Possibly because it just, like, if he saves Cassie, she'll be like, you idiot. And if he doesn't save Cassie, I mean, it would be much better for him to not save Cassie. I mean, you can't save Cassie, buddy. She's gonna die either way.
Yeah, but I think Jake's own guilt about that decision would have
I can see why it would
prompted
be
him
very
to...
difficult for him to make that decision.
Also, like, she's not Cassie, right? She's like a Yerk. What's her name?
Nis?
Yeah. Right, so it's like the after in 19 problem of, like, how do you know that Karen is free? It's like, Nis says that she and Cassie are, like, BFFs and they're fighting the Yerks together.
So
but,
true.
like, there's not, I don't know. It's very silly.
Side note that we should cut, but do you remember, Gray? You probably haven't seen this on Dead. There's some Buffy episode.
Right, they didn't address it, but it was a fucking dream. So the whole is Cassie a Yerk thing, whatever, doesn't really matter. As I've explained many times, so two fingers, drink.
Where Angel's talking about how, like, Spike's like, okay, so we're going to destroy the world or whatever. And Angel's like, okay, no, I'm really more interested in killing this one girl. And Spike's like, well, she's in the world, so that works out. This is what I keep thinking about. Yeah. With this, it's like, Cassie's in the world, so maybe save the world?
You can also feel free to cut this, but Spike's attitude towards, like, killing the world versus one person has very much informed my own villainy of, like... You know what? She's in the world, so that's pretty fine. Like,
I'm sorry, tell me more about your own villainy.
Well, like the Soraya part of me that's like, just shoot them. Like, that's a very... I feel that watching Buffy and Spike's very practical approach to just
practical approach
Buffy.
to villainy. That's great.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer?
Very much informed my own.
Never watched it.
Glad you could have that.
Practical approach to villainy aspect.
Why would you, though? Because it's great.
Is it a 90s reference? I'm not sure.
So, is there a Star Trek episode that is a similar "it was all a dream" type premise?
I don't remember one from the original series. Could be wrong, but I'm not the one to ask about the later series. Do you know, Gray?
I have no idea.
We might need
Lisa,
to ask
tell
our
us.
listeners. Yeah.
Friends who love Star Trek,
Let us know
tell
if
us.
Gray can check off they reuse the Star Trek plot. So let's dive back in. There must be more to talk about with this book, right?
So the opening is very grim. I remember reading the opening of Megamorphs 4 and thinking, wow, we haven't had this, like, visceral of they're all going to die in this battle situation maybe ever. Like, certainly not as an opening. Like, sometimes it's like, and we're fighting 8 Hork-Bajir, oh no, as, like, the climax of a book. But, like, it was so rough. And then I got to this one, I was like, oh my gosh, it's the same thing again.
And kind of worse.
And yeah.
It's a brilliant opening.
I really did not enjoy it.
Here's a great passage from this middle grade series. He faltered and I lunged.
It's got to be one of the best parts of the series. That opening fight is fantastic. I will be doing a top 10 battle scenes in the Animorphs thing. and you know it's coming on top. I mean, there's no point even hiding it. It's going to end up on top of the list. Maybe I'll be surprised, but I'm pretty sure it will.
Forward, missed. His tail broke free and he slashed and carved a hole in my underbelly. I watched, stunned and helpless. Those were my guts, spilling from my body. I froze up for one instant too long. He pushed me down onto pipes that... My fur was smoking. My flesh scalded. Middle grade.
Yeah.
Middle grade. As a reminder, middle grade starts at 8 or 9 years old.
This is the kind of scene where I'm like, how are they still alive? Like, how did someone not die in that battle?
Yeah.
And having
Pure
this happen
instinct,
2
that's
books
how.
in a row just is really driving home the, like, this war is so brutal for them. It's just still going on. They keep having these fights that are just incredibly tough. There's no end in sight unless Tom figures Jake out and infests him and we jump 10 years in the future.
Or murders him that
And
night.
murders him.
Which is one of the ways this possibly got started. Yeah. Also, so in that same opening sequence, right, they're trying to escape. They're very outnumbered. Each of them is fighting between 2 and 6 Orc-Bajir. There are taxons coming, and they're like trying to get out through this, closing garage door type thing. And Marco and Rachel are trapped on the other side, both seriously injured, especially Rachel. And Marco says, okay, cut them off and we'll find some other way out. And Jake thinks to himself, lose everyone or lose 2. My note there is just these fucking books. And so he decides lose 2 and begins to bring the door down. And then Marco and Rachel make a break for it. Marco lifts the door up, gets Rachel through, goes through himself, and then shuts the door back down. Very Indiana Jones style, right? And then
I will admit I'm a bit confused by the format of this show now. So we've gone through 30 minutes of discussing in depth the book's themes, and now we're going to go over the plot. It seems to be a bit the wrong way around. Anyway, I need a lavatory break. Be right back. Right, I'm back. Let's carry on.
crashes down and they are able to escape. It is so brutal. This whole section was, I was reading this thinking, this is basically a horror book, right?
Yeah.
It's like
It was
an
incredible.
action book with some really visceral horror elements where these children are being nearly slaughtered every time they have a fight now, and it is really difficult to read. Okay, I know this is a morphing thing more than wow, these fights are really brutal thing, but as they're demorphing, the guts that hung from my belly were drawn back in.
No, that's both. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's this bit he talks about when Tom sees blood on his leg later, and there's this whole, it's almost like a Lady Macbeth thing where he's like, yeah, sometimes when you demorph, you're just still covered in blood from battle.
Yeah.
That really hit home for me. There's another, one of the details from the battle that I absolutely loved reading, but was really horrifying. It's Rachel's the tank and her bear morph and stuff, and it talks about how 3 Hork-Bajir are standing shoulder to shoulder in kind of a football charge and just pushing her across the room, and she's being taken out of the way, and it's it's so scary to see her taken off the battlefield in such a efficient way.
The blood still being on them after they demorph makes me think, demorphing, it's such a powerful thing. It's none of the marks of battle are on them anymore. Except that that's not really true, and the blood is an outward manifestation of that. But I just flashed to the end of 16, I guess, when Jake and Cassie have this sort of verbal altercation about Jobab Fenestre, and at the end it's Jake goes and shovels manure with her, and everyone else comes over, and we joked, and we were us again, for now. And it's in such contrast to the end of this mission when it's they're not.
Props to the warning. That I remember that last scene now. We're ourselves for now. That book was another transitionary book from one era of the Animorphs to another. Very much like this one. A lot of the Jake books seem to be that way, where he bookends the different stages of the Animorphs. Well, Lila, my cat is sniffing the tripod and is almost tipping stuff over. Be careful, Lila.
Them again. That sort of ability to go back to normal is falling apart. And Cassie has this really strong emotional reaction that Jake is why now? Why is she falling apart now? But it's just this, it keeps happening. She's I killed so many Hork-Bajir in there. And he doesn't have the ability to comfort her. Marco and Rachel are having this fight about, Rachel's I could have killed them all. And Marco's no, you are out of control. You couldn't see. There was blood in your eyes. Your recklessness is gonna...
Technically, character trait, Rachel's impulsiveness impulsiveness, one finger, drink.
That cause major problems. And Jake tries to step in, but like can't really make peace, and he tries to get Tobias to keep a lookout, but Tobias is like flying away. And Jake's like, yeah, ever since he got tortured, he's been a little different.
I wanted to bring that up again.
So moody.
It's the rhetorical questions.
Since you brought up Rachel, what did you guys make of Rachel in this book?
It definitely is showing her on a path that is disturbing. You know, it's leaning into the mean Rachel side. I mean, it seemed still much more in line with her character than, say, 37, where who even knows. But, like, that does seem to be the direction she's moving. I was really struck by the very deliberate way she was described in Jake's dream, when it's like, she only has one limb left and one eye, and is almost unrecognizable, is like having trouble breathing, and it's still like everything she says is like aggressively, or she has this like violent energy about her, and it's like, yeah.
To me, again, that's like going to the same well as they went to with Taylor and like all the other, and like Visser 1 and Visser. Like, her physical body has been totally maimed in this like way that's meant to provoke a lot of horror. She's used to be like beautiful and stuff. It's
supposed to provoke Jake's guilt, because he's like, I used her really, like, I put her in dangerous situations. I resulted in her becoming this.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's the specific.
I wouldn't say that specifically. I think that plays into Cassie, but with Rachel, I think it's more... He holds certain aspects of each of his team in high regard. So Rachel obviously has the good looks and the acrobatics, the gymnastics and all that. So he's just sort of picturing the Animorphs completely having lost all those positive traits. So I'm losing. I forgot what they said. I'm sorry.
Physically based, like, oh no, the tragedy of the beautiful person who isn't anymore.
Right.
And it doesn't make any sense, because she could just demorph. Like, physical body is not what defines Rachel, and like...
I don't know, man. The thing about the Rachel...
But it's just a dream. Nobody said it that time, so I have to do it for you. I'm so used to you correcting yourselves in that regard. I'm getting cattail in my face. 2 fingers, drink.
In his dream...
Bye, Lala.
There's this weird, not even through line, it gets mentioned twice and never expanded upon, and I'm probably just reading into this. But there was a little bit where I had a sense that they were trying to be more aware of people with disabilities than these books generally are. So Rachel's comment to Jake, I mean, they have this one very brief scene together where she's in a wheelchair and she says to him, "Don't let us down, Jake. It's not just our freedom in the balance this time. It's life itself. There are many more like me, injured or weak or different. So let's do it and do it right." And he says, "Her wounds chronicled my failure as a leader. It was more than I could bear." And he kind of leaves her to do as she tells him to do, to go and meet Tobias. But that followed a few chapters after the scene where he ends up in an underground tunnel with a number of people who are disabled in some way.
Because it's like the Yeerks have no use for them.
Yes, casualties of the fitness policy is what they call themselves. So fugitives, refugees, casualties of the fitness policy. And they are in some way, it's a sampling of human and alien life where they are maimed or disabled, battle scarred, but it was the eyes that told the story, dejected, defeated, living death, right? So they are basically the people who somehow failed the fitness policy that the Yeerks put into place, either because of physical or mental disabilities. And Jake is in there for like a hot second before he freaks out and runs away. But then having Rachel as a person with disabilities come back and say, there are a lot of people like me, and that's why you have to fight, felt like maybe they were trying to make a through line, but actually neither of those gets developed really well enough for
let her finish what she's saying.
that
Well,
actually
but
be...
they also have the, like, in the secret world where the children are free, they're also, like, physically healthy and well-nourished,
Yeah.
right? Which is kind of going to the same thing.
Disability
Oh, you're so close, Ted. You're so close. Let's see if they catch it.
as like a physical representation of like tragedy rather
Depression.
than like rather than like it didn't feel like it was giving a very strong like people with disabilities are people too. It was
No,
like people with
yeah.
disabilities are like objects to be saved or to be
inspiration porn.
pitied.
Are you serious? Wow, this is the first part of the episode where I'd honestly say you're being a bit of a divvy. We're in the frickin' Yerk dystopia. Of course they're going to treat disabled people as if they're worthless. What are you saying? That this is how the authors see that disabled people are? No, it's in a dystopian future where disabled people aren't cared for. Let's hear that again, just to make sure I'm not doing them wrong. I've probably gone back a bit too far there.
Tragedy rather than rather than it didn't feel like it was giving a very strong people with disabilities are people too. It was people with disabilities are objects to be saved or to be pitied or a representation of Jake's failure.
Right. Yeah, it was not great. Could have been better.
Yeah.
We got some new aliens.
Yeah. Is that modern political issues? Sort of. I'll drink one finger for that. Drink. It's this whole ableism thing. Yeah. I work with disabled people, you know. What you try, you do whatever you can for them, and there needs to be more employment for disabled people. Okay, what I don't think is happening here is that Catherine Applegate is saying screw disabled people. Blech. No, she's saying that's what the Yerks would say, and we know that the Yerks are the bad guys. So I don't know what you're on about, honestly. Let's try to find what I'm looking for. So, trying to find the bit with justice and all that. I'm in the wrong book. I'm looking at book 43. Here we go. Book 41. Bit earlier than that. My name's Justice, the elders insist. Right, there's a picture in here. Sorry for the dead air again. Right, above the... The image was divided diagonally from the lower left corner to upper right. Below that line was an expressionist nightmare, a dark, angular city, jutting steel-grey towers rising through a blood-red mist of fog from which arms and screaming, agonised faces reached in vain for a sky they couldn't see. Above the diagonal demarcation was a different world, a cloudless, blue-skied landscape. In the sky hovered a hot air balloon, stark white like a sun, extending from the balloon's gondola. Crossing over from the joyful sky to a dismal urban abyss was a rope, a cord thin as thread. On this rope were people travelling upwards, pinned to the thread like clothes on a washing line. And as they crossed the border between darkness and light, faces stiff with frustration and rage softened. There were no smiles, but there were expressions of hope. I think this whole part with the people in the sewer-like area, I think, and this is an idea I got from actually listening to Animorphs Anonymous, I think it's a deliberate parallel between them and the group with the kids like Justice and all that, because they're both free of their yerks for various reasons, but you've got one that's in this lovely landscape with all this happy stuff, and you've got the ones on the ground sort of hunched over on the verge of dying in the sewers, crying and screaming in agony. And they got the cord between with the people on it with hopeful expressions. And it's that 50-50 where people in very similar circumstances can end up in totally different situations for whatever reason or another. So you've got the people in the sewer and then you've got the people in the area of the trees. I think that's what the book is trying to play on. I don't think it's connecting the people in the sewer system to Rachel. I think they're connecting them to the kids like Justice and all that. Again, I love this book because it makes you wonder what's going on. I love it.
They were cool. I wonder if they're real. Presumably not.
I don't know. Do they ever
Or maybe
come back?
they're the weird voices at the end. They inserted themselves into Jake's dream.
Yeah, so we have the Orf, who are like the, I guess, enforcement troops for
The
York
Orph,
Empire,
yeah,
for
they
some
have
reason.
they have evolved like like butterflies or something. These very ostentatious, visible organs that are not their real organs, but they're there to like provoke attacks. And Jake thinks, what if I hit them in the transparent part where it looks like there's nothing? Maybe that'll be their real organ.
And it
it is.
Great job, Jake.
And they have pupils that orbit their irises, and their irises like change color, I guess, with like emotion.
Yeah.
And they have one eye in the middle of their forehead and 3 legs.
Lila,
They're
stop
kinda
bullying
fun.
Fluffer.
They're
Okay.
fun.
I now have this headcanon where
Hold on, you see my cats here. They're still because Lila's only just come here, so Fluffer's at the top of the tree. Lila's just coming up. Fluffer's now hissing. Fluffer, Lila, come away. Come on, good girl. Fluffer's an old cat. We rescued her. She's about 15 years old now. She's not completely healthy. She's fine. But we thought we'd give her a nice retirement. And Lila is a very youthful cat. And Fluffer isn't quite used to it yet. Yeah, she's at the top of the tree. Just you probably can't see her because she's a black cat. So you probably can't see her well against a navy blue cat tree.
the Orph are the ones that they basically like only exist in people's dreams and like extrapolate the future out from their memories and
my
things, and then
goodness,
they
this
try
is
and
great.
like insert themselves into people's dreams, but they never actually are in the real world.
Hate that.
Right,
Thank
they have
you.
to create dreams so that they have somewhere to exist.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Nope, I hate it. Mm-mm. Don't like that.
Why?
Do you think they do this orphan?
Right.
Don't worry.
That's worthy of drinks. 2 fingers, and then we've got 1 finger left, which will be the last for today.
You're
Just a
editing
dream
it. You
space.
can cut that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, so they're the Orph, which is it's weird that they are the enforcement troops when like there are Andalites around who have weapon tails.
Not many of them, though.
Apparently not, but we do see a bunch of them feeding in a park, very orderly.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, Marco shows up.
It's
Yeah,
a dream.
Let's talk about Marco.
Oh, that counts. So, why are they not choosing Andalites over these Orph? It's a fucking dream, and the Orph probably have some metaphorical meaning, which I haven't actually grasped yet. I'm sure when I do my analysis of the Orph, I'll get some sort of idea. Whatever. That's it. You know what? Animorphology. I really like that. I really do. Ted, specifically. He knows his shit. Thank you to me for suggesting Animorphology. I know it's been a while, but I feel I can do it now. Yeah, that was great. Animorphology, really good. And if you want me to see more podcasts looking at the familiar just to get the comparison, please tell me. If not, I'll move on to another book. Probably The Weakness. That should be fun. Apart from that, thank you very much for watching. We didn't have the wild beard today, but it'll happen sometime. Thank you very much for watching, and I shall see you next time. Ta-ra!